is Chris Shelton. He is a former Scientologist and Sea Org member and is now a writer, consultant, and podcaster, YouTuber, and advocate for critical thinking. He grew up as a member of the Church of Scientology and worked for the church right out of high school for 25 years until escaping in 2013. 10-year anniversary. Yay! Since then, he's been recovering and gained a master's degree in psychology of coercive control, working to educate the public about the dangers of not just Scientology, but destructive cults and coercive control in all its manifestations. So let's all welcome Chris. You know, everybody golf clap.
Yay.
Sign clap
Chris,
behind. Yay, visual clap,
welcome.
everybody. Yay.
Thank you for joining
Welcome
us,
to
Chris.
the show, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are so excited to have you, and I love that you have your book right there in front so people can remember to check that out. What's it called?
Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about. And it's a book, not a memoir. So we get to critically analyze Scientology as a con operation and cult. And that's what this book is.
Excellent.
Awesome.
So we kind of read in your bio about your story, but do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you got into and out of Scientology?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, 10 years ago, I basically escaped, got out, and I was raised in Scientology. So I grew up in it, and my folks got involved when I was very, very young. Let's see, public school education, kind of regular looking life up until I was about 15 years old when my dad said, hey, why don't you go down to the local Church of Scientology and check it out for yourself? And I had been raised with a lot of Scientology principles and ideas, and I sort of accepted the idea, for example, that L. Ron Hubbard was a really, really smart guy who my parents really admired, and all of their friends did too. So this guy must be important, even though the rest of the world didn't seem to have a thing about him. And that there was this secret knowledge, there was this sacred lore and this very important information that Scientology could provide. And that my parents, I was very primed for, okay, show me what you got. What is this, right? And I was going to not be very critical about it because I didn't really feel like I had any reason to be. So I did the personality test, signed up, and the rest is history. I was 25 years working for Scientology. So it was right out of high school, right? I started when I was in high school, did 2 years of class work. They recruited me. 8 years in Santa Barbara, California, at the church there. And then I did the billion-year contract deal, and I signed, that my life away. And I went down to Los Angeles, and I lived at the big blue buildings. And I'm pretty sure most people have seen pictures of the Scientology big blue buildings. And that's where I lived and worked for 17 more years as a Sea Org member. And being in the Sea Org is basically, I don't know that this works, but it seems to work for me as a comparative. It's kind of like joining a monastery. Like you're not connected with the real world anymore. You are in a different world, and that world of the Sea Org is all about saving the planet through Scientology and through disseminating or propagating L. Ron Hubbard's books and lectures and language and thoughts and ideas. And the idea that we were going to, what they call, clear the planet. There is a lot of terminology in Scientology, and I'm not even going to touch on most of it tonight. Don't need to. There's just a lot of language. It's one of the most involved, complicated, language-heavy cults that exist ever. There might be, somebody pointed out to me that there might be actually more literature, more written work and spoken lectures from Hubbard than any other body of knowledge that makes up a religion, right? Christianity has the Bible, and there's a lot of writings through history of apologetics and arguments for and against and all that. I don't know that all of that totals to how much there is in Scientology.
Wow. And Scientology is compared to Christianity and many of these other religions, quite young, comparatively speaking. So
Correct.
That's a lot of writing.
Yeah. There's the idea, you might find this interesting, which is why I'm going to say it. There's an idea that L. Ron Hubbard might have suffered from a condition called temporal lobe epilepsy, which has as part of its symptomology intense, totalistic religious belief and fervor, and even delusional belief of being God or a God.
Oh,
And
interesting.
Oh, okay.
Right? There's also other symptomology that goes along with TLE. For example, what's it called? The hypergraphia, writing a lot.
Mhm.
And L. Ron Hubbard wrote a lot. And what he didn't write, he typed. And what he didn't type, he
Yeah.
dictated. And then there's also the 5,000 lectures that he gave over from 1950 to the 1970s. So he was prolific is my point. And the reason I bring that up also is because it's one of the features within the world of Scientology is thinking all the answers are here. You just got to find them, right? They're all there. You just got to get to it. And there's so much to get to that you spend years plowing through these materials, trying to consume all the wisdom, right? And this is one of the things that keeps people involved in Scientology for so long. And it was one of the things that also is a departure. What do we call this? A departure detour, like a way to stop people from leaving. Well, the answer's in your next level. It's the next book, the next thing. You just got to keep sticking with it, right? And you'll get everything you want. And this is a path that takes years and years to go down.
So what level did you get to, Chris?
I got to the level of clear.
Oh,
which is
Oh,
about
you get all the Thetans out of you.
so that's the level you're aiming for, right?
Right?
Like,
Isn't that the
once you get
level?
to clear, right?
Well, okay, clear is halfway.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
You never
I
actually
thought that was the
win
goal.
game.
It's
Okay.
a goal, but it's a sub goal. It was the big thing of Dianetics in 1950, and it stayed the big thing for quite a while. But then Hubbard had to create another thing because that wasn't enough, right? And it's this fantasy state of full three-dimensional eidetic memory. You never get sick. You can remember everything. You recover your education, like all kinds of things that are promised to you by achieving this new state of being called clear.
Okay.
Okay, it's kind of akin to a Buddhist nirvana state or quite a high level of spiritual awareness and ability, right? I'm gonna just consider everything I'm saying in air quotes, and you'll have it. I don't want to keep doing this all night, but
Yeah, no, we got
I'm
you,
a
man.
big
We got
fan
you.
of air quotes.
Pretty bad.
I got you.
Pretty bad. So clear is a thing, and I got to clear, and I spent a lot of years in Scientology helping a lot of people with it. I worked my ass off. I was physically, mentally, psychologically abused. I was assaulted. I had a lot of bad things happen to me when I was there. Again, it's a long story, and that's not what we're here for tonight. So I'll just tell you, it was a rocky road. And after 25 years of this, of working for the church, in 2012, I'd had enough. I'd had it was a 10-year journey of waking up. And even when I left the Sea Org in 2013, which is when I finally got out, it took me a year to get out. And once I did get out, I was still in the believer headspace. I still wanted to do Scientology. I just didn't want to work for Scientology anymore. I saw there being a difference between these things. And I mean, in the same way that you could be a priest and leave the priesthood and still be a practicing member, right?
Sure.
It's just that, they ridicule you, call you names, and think you're a scumbag for leaving. So that's kind of what happened to me in 2013 is I was at the receiving end of an awful lot of nonsense from official Scientology. And I was trying to be a good little Scientologist and, pay my money and do my things and make good. And that's when it's sort of the true nature of it sort of came real super clear. And I started being at the receiving end of, some of the ugly that we all know Scientology engages in. I hadn't yet started speaking out. I was just trying to make my way into being a Scientologist again as a public level paying Scientologist. But the core group of Scientology, the Sea organization, this group I was part of, the billion-year contract people, the fanatics, and I use that word fully describing myself at that time, they weren't interested in me individually continuing Scientology because I had betrayed them, right? I'd left.
Oh,
so
so this actually, this spurred your deconversion, as it were. You were not intending to deconvert, you just wanted to leave the Sea Org, but their reaction then caused a cascade effect.
Big time. I learned the hard way that Scientology excels at making their own enemies.
Oh, interesting.
And it just wasn't clear to me right up until then. I mean, everybody.
Wait, it wasn't clear? I thought you,
yeah,
you
it
had
wasn't
reached.
Clear to me. That's right. So
yeah, it's too easy. It's too easy.
All too easy.
A lot of things were not clear to me. So after I got out, now here's another note, right? I always forget to mention this earlier. When you're in the Sea Org, and especially as a Scientologist in general, but really in the Sea Org, no internet.
Oh.
Okay, none. For most of the time that I was in, there was no internet access. Towards the end of the time I was in, around 2011-ish, they installed a filtered internet access on Wi-Fi on the base, on the Sea Org base. Oh, the Sea Org is a paramilitary outfit, by the way. Ranks, ratings, uniforms, they look like Navy people. Yes, sir, no, sir, how high, sir, boot camp, all of it. So I was play acting as an officer, as a naval person for 17 years also. So the regulations in that group, on that base, on that place where we all lived, were that you don't have outside unfiltered access to the internet. And you definitely do not ever have okay to look at anything critical of Scientology.
Ever. What is the justification for that?
You will upset your spiritual self. There's words they use.
You'll get more thetans.
The word they use is that it will interbulate you. It will upset.
Oh, okay.
Spiritual duress.
Now I have to look at what interbulate means.
Yeah, is that a real word or is that a Scientology?
No. That's a Scientology word. I just gave you a.
Okay, I was just Googling that. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I have it. And to insert or introduce between other elements or parts, to insert material into a text, to insert into conversation, and enter them as to introduce, interpolate.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, in Scientology, interbulate means to create a kind of mental or psychological or spiritual duress where the person is basically stressed out, freaked out, upset, and annoyed. And this will not only upset you needlessly, right? You're just going to go read a bunch of lies about Scientology. I don't know why you would do that in the first place, but also it's going to impede your spiritual progress.
So
built-in.
Go ahead. I have a question when you're done.
It's the built-in nullification of criticism in Scientology that if you're exposed to criticism, the person giving it to you is a suppressive person. And they only mean ill will to you. They are only doing that because they are bad people, because obviously Scientology is so good. So anybody who would be against it in any way is clearly an evil person who must be destroyed. So they are called suppressive people, and which is what I am now. And as a church critic, right? They label you with this. It's an official declaration. It's not just a slang thing that they throw around. It's a piece of paper with your name on it, and they write up crimes you've committed against Scientology's justice codes. It's a whole involved thing.
Do they send it to you? Do you get it like a list of grievances?
Not anymore. Because people were posting them on the internet.
So,
as
to
as
tie
one
this
does.
into your talk, because I'm gonna get into like the meat of it now, but I'm going to talk. Do you find when you did your research and understanding how cults work that a lot of other, not just Scientology, but other cults will take certain words or invent certain words and apply new definitions or twist language so the members will not like, well, I thought this word meant this, but now my cult leader is telling it means this, and I can now change the definitions as basically, policing, how we think about words and the way that we use them.
Yes. Yeah. What
Okay.
you're referring to is loaded language.
Right.
A guy named Robert J. Lifton, a psychologist, studied this in Chinese concentration camp survivors back in the 50s and 60s. And he interviewed a bunch of them, and he found these 8-9 points of thought reform, the brainwashing, how people are changed. And language is a key feature of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. If you can, okay, it comes down to this, right? If you can control how somebody interprets the world, you control them, you own them. And language is how people interpret the world, how they communicate about those interpretations, right? They sense, perception, etc. But how do you talk about it? You communicate about it. You use language, and language can create, like schema, like structures in our mind. It's not just a bag of beliefs. It's how those beliefs interrelate with one another and which is more important than the other. And there's a whole structure to it. And that is what we use language to create and communicate about. And so when you use new language, new definitions, new ideas, which cults frequently do, you can create a different way of thinking about the world that literally puts a person into a whole different headspace, a whole different world. And that's the power of language. It's one of the most powerful control mechanisms.
And I imagine also if people feel like they're in the know and have a whole lot of terminology and words and terms that describe things that other people don't understand, that probably makes you feel like, hey, I'm kind of special. I'm in the know here. I have this specialized knowledge that I've been told I have, and this is proof of it. Other people don't understand me. Ooh, interesting.
Absolutely. It's because the us versus them paradigm, the us versus them, that has to exist in a cult for it to be a cult. This language is one of the ways they create that. There's also another concept involved in this, which the language, of course, is part and parcel of your sacred science or your sacred lore, your sacred truths. And those truths are what set your group or your belief set or your culture apart from the rest of the world. And we're better and they're worse. We're smarter, they're stupider. We're more ethical, they're more criminal because of this belief set, the sacred lore that we carry with us. And so that's another way of creating that barrier between the group and the rest of society.
It's the othering. Like we are better. We are the better people. We have the true knowledge. Those people are infidels, or they're lost. They're whatever it is. That it makes the insular group feel special, and that's why they're oppressed or not understood or whatever, because they have the secret knowledge of the universe or whatever answer the cult leader is kind of feeding to them.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's about what was I going to say with that? Just the us versus them. Yeah, that's just as long as you can build up the us versus them. And there's lots of different ways to go about that. But the language. That's right. You'll notice they always have a word for the others. They don't just call them others or non-Scientologists. They've always got some word for it. And in Scientology, they adopted a racial slur. Hubbard, in his infinite wisdom, and in the UK in the 1960s, decided to start calling non-Scientologists by a term which I understand is incendiary, and I'm just telling it to you because this is what Scientologists say. The term is WOG, W-O-G, and this is a term that is was used in Britain, colonial type language to describe people from the Indian subcontinent. And Hubbard adopted this for anybody who's not a Scientologist. They're a
Ooh.
wog, right?
Wow.
Oh, the wogs.
Wow.
The wogs, right? We used it the same way in the Harry Potter universe. They used the word muggle.
That just
Well,
happened
as
in the chat.
in pagan circles,
exactly.
that's the othering of other people that aren't into paganism, is they use the term muggle, so they adopted it. Again, that is another othering, of calling people like, you don't have the special knowledge, you're not super special because you can do special powers.
Right.
And it's always the same. It's the same shit, different package.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that in studying cults, once you get out of your cult, right, and you kind of realize it wasn't really that special, and everything that was going on there was kind of the same thing that's going on in other groups, that's a very important step in recovery to realize that. Took me a few years to get there, right? Because you're the entire point of being in a cult is you're special. They ain't. And so you feel that your leader is a very unique and special human being. And so even after you come out, your whole world polarizes, but now he goes, or she goes, from being a very special human being to being the worst human being, right? Like the person who represents the most god-awful, horrible, abusive person you could imagine. And now that's the role they play for a while, until you realize and learn about Jim Jones and David Koresh and, all these other gurus, Keith Raniere, and et cetera, right? And then you realize, oh, my guy wasn't so special at all. There's a playbook, and all these guys play by it. And that does, all of this is part of, why intelligent people fall for smart, for stupid things, for religion, right? For goofy ideas, for cults.
Yeah, and it sounds like, from what you've been saying too, maybe this one in particular could have been developed with that in mind, particularly targeting people with sort of an intellectual hook with all of this writing and everything. Would you say that that tracks, or is it kind of the same everywhere?
Well, okay. Everything's context specific, but if you're talking about Scientology, Dianetics in 1950 originally appealed mostly to professionals, scientists, and engineers. It was written as a scholarly academic work. Now, if you read through it, it's the exact opposite of that. But Hubbard's claims were all based on science. It was not started as a religion. And it was the modern science of mental health. That was Dianetics. And that tanked after real scientists and real social, psychologists and psychiatrists and other professionals looked at it, read it, and went, no, this isn't science. I don't know what the hell this is, but it's not science. And it got, a lot of lambasting. And by 1952, it was bankrupt. And L. Ron Hubbard had to kind of, from the ashes of that, kind of rose like a phoenix with Scientology and made it a religion, because that way he could make medical claims and not get prosecuted.
Did he have a bad experience with psychiatry or psychology? Because I know that he used it as like, oh, the psychologists and psychiatrists are like the worst people. Because so I was wondering if he had like a bad experience with it, because also too, especially in modern time, you see people using psychology language, and they will twist it to manipulate people and also use it against people that they're actually victimizing. So I'm just curious if that was part of the MO, because we see people doing this today a lot. I can think of several people that use that type of language to abuse people.
Oh, yeah, that's a real problem. I rail about it all the time on my channel, because I've actually stopped using psychiatric diagnostic terminology because it's so misused and so watered down, and so like it's not even worth talking about people as narcissists anymore. the term doesn't really mean anything. Gaslighting, well, people just use it to mean lying, and believe me, gaslighting is not just lying.
Right. And that's the type of stuff that drives me crazy. Those of us that are educated in the terminology, we are like, no, that's not what, no, that's not correct. That's not correct. And it just because it's so become part of the nomenclature that people don't know what they're actually talking about. And they have like this, they read one Psychology Today article and then suddenly they're an expert. You know?
Yeah, that's kind of a product of our internet age, I think, but also probably earlier than that. But I think a little bit. I think it was so hard to learn things before the internet that people respected the quality of the knowledge they had a little bit more. Maybe that's a unwarranted statement, but anyway, it's language can be a powerful motivator. That is no question about it. Where I wanted to go tonight in talking about why smart people or intelligent people will fall for silly ideas like certain religions and stuff like that, right? And I know I'm in a friendly space on this one as far as religion goes, right? I'm not a big fan of religion. I'm not also a big enemy of it. I'm not huge on organized religion. That's where I really kind of point my guns, because that's where I see the most systemic and structural abuse occur, is when it gets organized. I don't really care what beliefs people carry around in their head, but I do know that belief informs actions, and so we have to monitor this kind of thing. And when it comes to intelligence, though, here's the thing, right? The big secret is that whoever said intelligence was supposed to protect you from anything, especially bad ideas when it comes to emotional belief. It's a completely false premise in the first place. You don't outthink your emotions. And our emotional needs are more, I'm just going to say, are more powerful drivers for us than our frontal lobes when it comes to rational thinking. We react in the moment, we react over periods of time because of our emotional needs. And that's not just an emotional response. I am trying to differentiate an emotional reaction from an emotional need. Here we're going over into Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy and stuff like that, right? You have your basic physical needs. You got to care for those. You know, like we talk about when people first get out of a cult or a religious situation, do you have transport? Do you have food? Do you have a roof over your head? If those things aren't cared for, there's no use talking about anything else. So you deal with the bottom first, but then as you start moving on up the pyramid, you deal with emotions and emotional needs. We've all got them. There's no human being immune to them. And it's only how we manifest them that's different. So, so that all being said, cult leaders and cult recruitment and religious leaders, if we want to sort of think about these things, when I'm talking about abusive stuff, I'll just use the word cult. There is a definition for destructive cult that I use. I'm not being loosey-goosey in my language on this. I've got a website. There's exact specifications of what makes a group a destructive cult, and it's not weird beliefs.
And what is the website so we can send people to it?
Okay, good. Let me throw it up on the, actually, I'll just link to the page because I have it open right now.
Perfect.
Oh, also, Chris, if you notice in the chat somebody has a relevant question on when you're talking, you can just respond to it. You don't have to wait for Q&A.
Oh, great. No problem.
Yeah, you can just,
but yeah.
like, again, just don't mention their name, you know, because some people aren't out to their families and we want to respect people's privacy.
Absolutely. Okay, good.
So you've linked us to mncriticalthinking.com.
That's right. That's my website.
All right. Well, now I'm going to bookmark it.
That's got the page with what is a cult? What is it? And I use the term destructive cult because I'm not talking about the Boy Scouts, and I'm not talking about a hobby group, right? Or a bowling club or something. You can get culty and, you know, intense and obsessive and all that without becoming a destructive cult. That's a whole different thing where you have a leadership and you have followers and there's codependency and it's us versus them. And it's really money motivated for the most part, although power, sex, and influence are also motivators for these things. So we have these characteristics for this. We're not just talking about any group you don't like.
Intense fandoms are not cults, people. So you can really love Doctor Who and not be in a cult.
It has nothing to do with entertainment or any of that, right? So, okay, so when we talk about people getting into these things, 75% of people who get into Scientology get in through friends and family.
Oh,
They're referred in.
that's a lot.
It is a lot. And I will
Yeah.
now extend that and say most people get into cults, as I've found through my studies, right? Through friends and family, through referrals, through someone they trust. I'm second gen. I mean, I got in through my family, right? That's a whole, and second gen's kind of a, got its own pile of difficulties with it. But I guess where I'm going with this is trust. When trust is lowered, when need is high, when people have trauma or stress or anxiety in their life, when they are experiencing a change of some kind that is causing them difficulty, like they move, they lose a loved one, their kids move out of the house. Both the kids are experiencing an uncomfortable change and the parents are. These vulnerable times in our lives when we're on shaky ground, when things aren't so clear, not so certain, we don't necessarily know where the future's taking us, we're concerned and upset about things, our stress levels are a little higher. That's the easiest time for cults to recruit people. And that tends to be the kind of demographics they look for. And I've seen this with religious groups, right? With social media promotion and stuff. They look for recently widowed, recently divorced, that's right, lost a loved one, stuff like that. They'll go get lists of this demographic and target them on social media with specific ads and promotional materials. And they're doing this because emotions are running a little high during those times, and rationality is running a little bit low. We're really into the feelings of those times more so than thinking our way through them and navigating it that way. And truth be told, most people live most of their lives that way. But the trauma times are times where you're really able to grab hold and get somebody. So intelligence, how smart you are, how able you are to figure your way through things, is actually most of the time only going to help the cult.
Oh.
Right?
How so?
Because when we are looking for answers or solutions to problems, intelligent people who can think with imagination and creatively and know a lot of things, are able to come up with their own reasons why what you're saying makes sense. They're more able to fill in your blanks with what they want to hear more quickly. Because their imagination is doing your work as a cult recruiter for them. They're looking, right? That's why I set up the emotional need, right? Because that tends to be the primer. It's not always. Sometimes people get into these groups who are perfectly happy and everything is fine with their life. It's not necessarily this case. But even then, the intelligence works to help the recruitment process. And it also helps to fill in the blanks from what the cult leader's dogma, where it doesn't make any sense. See, a person who needs things explained to them or who doesn't get it will say, I don't get this. This doesn't make any sense. Walk me through it so it makes sense. And it's a little harder to do. I can tell you from personal experience, it's a little harder to do with somebody who's not thinking so clearly or who can't connect the dots so easily. It's harder to do.
Which brings us to our poll questions.
Yes.
Look at me segueing.
Yeah.
Good segue. Let's share those poll results.
Where we at here?
Here, I'll read them aloud. It says, have you ever been involved in something that you would now consider a cult? And 44% of people here tonight said yes. Also 44% said no, and the other 11% are not sure. And then Now, the question number 2 is really interesting. We asked, do you think you would know how to help if a loved one became involved in a cult? Only 6% of people said yes. 56% of people said no, and 39% were not sure.
Yep, no
And
surprise there.
wow, I'm a little surprised. But I guess we'll talk more about that.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, are all cults religious in nature? Only 11% of people said yes. 83% of people, the overwhelming majority, said no, and 6% are not sure. Okay,
Good.
let's talk about these results. You mentioned that
Yep.
it wasn't surprising, number 2. Tell
Nope.
us your thoughts on these outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously a lot of folks here have been involved in what they consider to be a cult per number 1 there. Just want to comment on that because that's no big surprise at all. Probably a lot of people were. More people are involved in cults than is generally recognized or acknowledged, first off. And cults, by the way, can come down to a cult of 2. The dynamics can be the same in a predatory abusive relationship as they can be in a group, predatory abusive group. The control mechanisms, the thought processes, the action patterns, they're all the same. Okay, so that being said, do you think you know how to help if a loved one became involved in a cult? The reason I'm not surprised by this at all is because this is what I do a lot of my time is I help people who have family or friends in a cult. As I consult with people on this, and I'm not doing therapy. I'm not even going anywhere near any of that. It's more intervention kind of stuff, right? It's more like how do you talk to somebody who's in a cult? I'll tell you what you don't do is yell and scream at them. But that's what family members routinely will do, and they will blow it. They'll blow it before they've even had a chance to really help the person. And that's when they end up coming to me, right? Or other professionals who know how to do this stuff. And it's hard. It's really, really hard to talk to somebody who's in a cult about their cult, which is generally why you don't do it that way. You talk about other things.
Okay.
For example, I'll just share this with everybody here tonight. It's no big secret. We talk about this all the time, but just so everybody knows, if you want to help get somebody out of the cult they're in, talk to them or educate them about a different cult. If they're in Scientology, show them shiny, happy people.
Okay.
Show them Wild, Wild West, right? Show them how to become a cult leader or something like that, right? Like show them some other stuff that has nothing to do with their cult.
Okay.
Because you're only going to make them defensive and they're only going to fight you. But when you show them other people's stuff, they can laugh and point just like you do. And then then seeds are being planted, right? Because again, they're all running by the same playbook. So what they encounter in shiny, happy people, they are doing that in Scientology too, you know, but it's different language, different manifestations of the behavior.
So you have to leave it to them ultimately to realize for themselves that this is a cult. You give them the tools to recognize it, but you don't tell them this is a cult. You let them figure that last connection out on their own.
You're gonna bring out the cult word. You better be ready, right? And so yeah, you got to be real gentle. And it's not. It's not. And I don't mean being passive aggressive. You really have to care about this person. If you do not care about them, or if you don't like them, or if you don't want to see them do well in life, you're not going to help them out of that cult. That's just a given, right? Because it's a very compassionate and very caring thing to try to help somebody in that way, and it's a major deal. You are changing their life in a significant way. They've gotten into something that's changing their life in a horrible way. You're trying to change it back or help or recover or rescue them. It's a big deal. It's not just a one and done. You don't just go have lunch with them one day and talk them out of it. It's a much deeper thing. And I'm sure a lot of you who were in religion could relate to this. If I took you to lunch one day, I wasn't going to talk you out of your belief in Christ. No. It's going to take a while, right? You're going to work on that.
So, like, I can't remember his name, that gentleman in the 70s and 80s that like would kidnap people, like did the kidnapping of people that were in cults by their families. Yeah. And then they put was it effective? Because I heard that, because there's mixed results. And and to me, that seemed abusive because the cult had already kind of done that to them. And they had formed these really strong emotional bonds, because like honestly, yeah, it's fucked up what the beliefs were, but it's basically like in my mind, like you're pulling people away from like basically this new family that they formed. And
Correct.
those emotional bonds are very, very strong. So, you know, that always struck me as like when I heard about that type of stuff, I was just like, this seems really icky.
Yeah. No, it is. That was deprogramming, and we don't do that anymore.
Okay.
I wasn't even doing it back then, but you know, the people who were doing it don't, and it is nothing but frowned on and looked at as a dark period in the history. It was a social reaction as well to the danger of cults as presented by Jim Jones in 1978 with Jonestown.
Right.
Happened, the world changed, and cultures became hyper aware of, and like the satanic panic, overly concerned about the cult problem in a very, very aggressive way. And so people whose kids were getting into cults were getting kidnapped and beaten on and stuff like that. It was gross, it was disgusting, and it has nothing to do with modern intervention techniques. If you watched an intervention these days, it looks like a conversation. And if you don't have the person have that conversation, you don't have it, because there's no reason to. They're not listening to you, you know. And it's a very, very different thing than it used to be.
So it sounds like people's consent has been centered more in these interventions. You have to be involved in your own escape.
That's right. There's also more of a psychological acknowledgement now of the fact that actual damage is being done to people in these groups through their techniques and practices. And so there's a recovery process to this. It's not just like you're out and the next day everything's fine. It's believe me, it's not. And
you know, did you know there are organizations that help people recover from religion?
I heard about this.
And there's this thing called religious trauma syndrome that people can actually go to therapy for and get help for. There's resources out there. Shh.
I've heard about this.
Weird.
Something like recovering from religion.org or something like that.
And like secular therapy project where people are trained to deal with religious trauma.
Exactly. No, I've talked to a lot of psychologists over the years. I have Darrel on my channel a couple times. So yeah, no, I'm definitely down with that. And finally, this last bit, just to finish the poll thing, our cults are. I asked that last one because I was kind of curious what was going to come up. All cults are religious in nature. No, they're not. They're not at all. Not even in like a little bit. And if you want an example, NXIVM. I mean, you know, that everybody can relate to, right? You also
so sorry.
It was this disgusting individual, and he cribbed from Scientology, by the way, on top of other things.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, directly. Like
it's part of his bio.
He actually sent a person down to a Scientology church and had him pick up a bunch of stuff and bring it to him. I mean, he was just straight up plagiarism. But like Scientology's all that anyway. But it was it's interesting how some of them do that. Jim Jones made a real study in his life of religious figures and leaders and cults and stuff too. Some of them do that. Some of them just kind of organically grow it, and others study. But they're not all religious in nature at all. And there are many, many, many examples from martial arts dojos to acting classes to, I mean, hell, I could probably find some, knitting circles that get culty. I mean, any group of people can get culty.
Okay, so what are the signs or the clues or the indications that someone might want to watch out for to identify whether this group I'm getting into seems cool and everything? I love knitting, but this is getting culty.
Yeah, see, this is the hardest part about this. And the reason why is because the biggest red flag is also the thing that is the biggest reason you're joining the cult. And that's the feelings that you're experiencing when they're recruiting you. Now, the recruitment process doesn't always look like a recruitment process, right? But when they're getting you on board, when they're convincing you that this is the real deal and that they've got a line in on sacred truth or say special knowledge or some other thing they're doing that appeals to you. You feel absolutely amazing, like really over the top amazing. By design. Like that's the intention. They want to get you feeling that way. That's what love bombing is all about. We also call that manipulative kindness. It's a really nasty thing, right? Because it's a bunch of people faking empathy. And a lot of the people who come into these groups have broken attachments or disorganized attachments or problems in their earlier relationships. And here come a bunch of people who are acting and talking like no one has ever acted or talked to them before. They're liked, they're admired, they are complimented, they are, you're being told how wonderful you are, how smart you are, just for walking in the door. We used to tell people this in Scientology all the time. At the beginning phases, right, is you were aware enough spiritually, you were aware enough to come in here. You know there's a problem and you're here to solve it, and we're here to help you. And we're going to do everything and anything we can to help you help yourself and get over these problems, right? And that's why you need to pay right now. Right? Not wait till tomorrow, not wait till the next day. Don't go home and think about it. You need to pay right now because, fate has brought you here, right? Like these are the circumstances. And you know what's going to happen when you go home. You're going to start thinking about it. And you're going to start having doubts and you're going to start having questions. And you're going to look on the internet and you're going to find some reason to blow this opportunity off. And it's going to be gone. Right? Because your reactive mind is telling you this is not the place you need to be right now. And I'm telling you it is.
It seems like
we would talk.
I'm just kind of laughing as you said reactive mind, and I just hear like that's skepticism. Like, is this too good to be true? And basically, your reactive mind is your skeptic brain, like coming into forefront, going like, "This seems like some crap."
Yeah, but this is the pressure that they're bringing on, right? Is they don't want you thinking about it. They don't want you going home. They don't want you adding time to your decision-making process. This is what they would say in Scientology, amongst other things. MLMs do the exact same thing. MLMs are complete cults, by the way. Yes, every single one of them. So yeah, right. This is
I know. I have some Mary Kay I can tell you. I fell for it back in my 20s. It's a journey, everybody.
I made the mistake of buying that one time to get somebody to quit bothering me, and that was a mistake. It didn't end. Next, I was being invited to the meetings. I can't do it. I can't.
There it is. There it is. So it's all, exactly. It does sound like predatory car dealers because it's the same damn thing, right? It's hard sell, it's rush sell, it's pressure selling. And it's all designed to prey on use different methods of influence. Right? Scarcity, for example, is a method of influence. If you make something scarce, people want it more. If you make it so that it's not going to be here tomorrow, but you can only get it today, somehow those are magical spell-like words to people that make them pull out their wallet where they otherwise wouldn't have. It's bizarre, but it's true.
We're afraid of missing out.
Yes,
nobody wants to miss out.
Yeah. That's right. And that's only one of about 9 different methods of influence that have been studied, broken down, researched, etc. Right? So scarcity is one of those things. Social proof is another one, which is why love bombing is so important, because it's a group of people coming in. And when a group is telling you something, we're far more willing and able to believe it, or likely to believe something, than if just one person's telling us a thing. That's another influence mechanism, right? So all of the cult recruitment actions that occur are designed to prey on all of these different things. And after you've given a group like Scientology a few years to figure out what works and what doesn't, they develop these these methodologies, right? And they are designed to bypass your intelligence. They're designed to play on your emotions and fool you into thinking you're doing one thing when you're doing another. So it's you know, it's not a matter of, well, you're just so smart, you're just going to see through all of this. No one's that smart.
Advertisers do it to us all the time.
That's right.
And we fall for it all the time. Like, and I think that's, I think also too, like people, because like, well, you know, I don't think that I would fall from like this type of BS. I'm like, you do it anyway. Like advertisers play on your emotions and play on the FOMO effect. Yep. And then you will purchase something because you want to be part of the in group and you want to feel special. And it's like, oh, and now I got this. It's the same tactic, but they're adding it also to, you know, following a charismatic leader and that type of shit. And right. And we're all valuable to this effect. And I think people like, you know, that haven't been part of a cult or religious upbringing or whatever, they don't think they fall for it, but you do. You're just doing it on a small scale instead of a larger scale where you're following someone like L. Ron Hubbard or a David Koresh or whatever.
That's right. That's exactly right. What I tell people, what I try to bring it down to really get across to folks, and maybe this will communicate, I don't know, but basically, if you can be lied to, you can join a cult.
Right.
I mean, it's really that. It is like that. And I don't know any human being who can't be lied to. Mm-hmm. You know, we all fall for something. And we all have those emotional needs. That's the other thing about it, right? Is that just because my emotional needs are different from yours doesn't mean we don't both have them, and we can categorize them the same way. And so maybe mine is more weighted toward identity or ego or purpose or meaning, where yours is more community focused and you want groups and you want to be cared for and something like that. Well, a cult has already got it all worked out where they're going to appeal to both of those equally well. They're just going to use a different pitch, right? And they're just going to, and that's the whole point of, people might have heard of those personality tests that Scientology does. Lots of groups do stuff like that. The whole point is to get you telling them what your emotional needs are.
And then they're going to tailor the sales pitch based on your answers.
Correct. For me, for example, as a 15-year-old kid walking in there, my biggest emotional need was to get a fucking date. I was a nerd. I was always in a book. No girls would talk to me. And I walk in there, and this is my big secret, right? Yeah, my big secret. I'm a 15-year-old guy, right? Who doesn't have this secret? But I think this is a big secret. And I do this 200 question personality test, right? Answer all these stupid questions. And this person sits down across from me and starts talking to me about my communication level and my happiness versus my depressed and my anxious and worried versus stable and happy. And, you know, and we're going over all this very scientific information on this very scientific graph. And she looks up at me and goes, oh, well, you know, it looks like your biggest problem is that you're just not able to relate to females very well. And I almost fell out of my chair. How'd you know? You know, like, when you're,
oh my goodness, I'm a walking bowl of hormones.
But here's the weakness. Here's the weakness, and this is, and I have found this to be almost universally true, is when you are getting someone to open up to you, when they start trusting, when they start telling you even the smallest of their secrets, and it starts opening that line up, somehow in doing that, your ability to accept back from them things that you will think are true just because of the way this thing is going so well for you right now, you're more willing to believe what this person tells you, right? I've got this class and it's going to handle everything, right? And you've opened up. So now you're vulnerable. Now you're like, oh my God, well, I really, this is going to help me? You have a class and it's going to solve this problem forever? Yeah. Oh. Lucky me that I walked in here today, right? Like, that's how you start feeling. You know, the whole sales thing has gone, you know, by the boards. And this isn't just my experience. I recruited hundreds of people into Scientology over the years, and this is how we would do it. and I didn't think about it at all as emotional manipulation. I thought I, was doing the Lord's work, so to speak. So I never really questioned why it worked. I just knew it did, and it got people in, and it was saving souls, right? I mean, that's not the language we used, but it was the same concept.
Yeah.
So if it works, if you believe the message is good, you're not worried about how you're getting it to people because the outcome is good. So
Exactly.
if you're getting people brought into it, then you're helping them. So why would you think that the methodology might be bad?
Exactly. And when you are convinced that you're saving the world, right? When the stakes are made that high, and that's not a day one thing, right? Nobody's walking in there, I'm going to save the world on day one, right? It's a boiling frog in the hot water thing, right? It's a slow burn. But once you get there, and it took me about 2.5 years to get there, anything is justified.
So if you could go back to your 15-year-old self and talk to that 15-year-old, what would you say to the 15-year-old so they're not taken in by like something that's like, oh, you're having a hard time relating to females. Let me sell you this class. Like, what would you tell that 15-year-old not to get drawn into those bad ideas?
Exactly. It's a tough one. Because it's so specific to each person as to what they need to hear. Right? For me, I mean, it's a harder question to answer than you might think, because I have to talk myself out of, everything my parents have convinced me of for my whole life, right? But if I knew it was me from the future, right, then I might give a little bit of credence to it, and I might go, look, man, I know this looks like ABC right now, but let me tell you that, if you continue going down this path, you're going to end up, your life isn't going to be your own. You're going to be running around saying yes sir, no sir, how high sir, to a bunch of stupid idiots, and you're going to get yelled at daily, and you're going to get beat up on regularly, and you're going to have really bad things happening to you. And it looks great right now, but it ain't. I mean, that will obviously be the kind of conversation I'd have to have with myself back then, but that's probably not super useful for people. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so complicated, because I don't think, like, I didn't expect you to give me like a perfect answer, but that's what makes it so complicated, because everybody needs to hear a certain thing no matter where they are in life. Like, I got into paganism when I was going through a divorce because my life fell out of control, and this is a way for me to get control. And people will look for things like that when a lot of things start feeling chaotic, and they need a life raft, basically.
See, the best, here's what it comes down to for me in terms of trying to give people advice. And it sounds so simple and so stupid, but it has to, because that's the only thing that I can give to somebody that they might possibly remember in the moment. And the moment is a moment when the moment they need to remember this is when it's going to be the hardest to. You got to give yourself time. At any major important decision in your life, any one, if it's going to have any consequences of any importance on you or people you love, stop and think and give yourself time, because facts don't change, emotions do. So the same facts that are true today about how good an offer this is, how wonderful an opportunity this is, what an incredible, investment moment you have here, it'll still be true tomorrow, and it'll still be true the next day if it's really true. But how you feel about it is what's going to affect your decision-making process, not the truth or falseness. We don't make decisions based on whether something's true or false. We make decisions based on how we feel about a thing, and your feelings will change. So the way I try to talk to people about this is I say, so give yourself the favor, do yourself the favor of not letting yourself be an idiot. And in the moment of our impulsive decision making, I don't think there's a single person who's listening to me right now who hasn't experienced impulsive decision making that resulted in a big ass mistake. You really screwed things up. And if you know, okay, I know what that feels like. So the next time, right, I'm gonna give myself a moment to let the mood. How long do you need? I don't know. You need as long as you need for your emotions to change so that you can think more clearly about the thing it is that you're looking at or wondering or deciding about.
So I also have a question, like, why do people think that only like dumb people fall for cults?
Ego, because they need people to be less than them so that they can feel better about themselves and their own decision making.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about this problem because I'm too smart for that. All those other people are going to fall for a cult, but I'm safe. I'm in
That's right.
control.
As far as I can tell, it's 100% ego. I will give the benefit of the doubt to ignorance, right? To somebody who truly is like so ignorant of how people are that they just think people are stupid. See, the thing that not one of those people realizes is that they're sitting there judging this person for their decisions, but they know more about that situation than that person ever did. Like I've told you more about Scientology tonight, right? Than most Scientologists know in certain things, right? They're being kept in the dark on purpose. And somehow that fact seems to completely elude people who are judgmental about cult members. Is they want to, they just got to feel superior for some reason, or they just totally miss the fact that they know more than the cult member does. And then they judge. It's a kind of hindsight bias, really. You know, it's kind of like, well, I know better than them. Well, of course you do, because you know the outcome. When these people are walking through their life, they don't see the ruination and the ruined families and the busted up businesses in their future. They think they're going to go clear and they're going to conquer the world and they're going to be on top of it and everything's going to be wonderful.
I mean, when you say you went clear, I thought you reached the upper echelon, like you had like reached full Scientology wonderment, and then you're like, nope, that's halfway through, and I was like, really?
Yeah. 27 years and I only got halfway along. That was one of the reasons I left, right? It's like, I got to get up this bridge. I want to be an operating Thetan too. You know, how come I can't get up there? So I never learned the entire time I was in. I never learned about Xenu. I never learned about the volcanoes or any of that crap. I learned about that after I got out. Oh, was I pissed? Oh, was I mad? Oh,
you missed out.
Like, are they having a hard time recruiting now because
Yep.
like that's so prolific now and just seems absolutely like nutballs insane?
Yeah. No, they're having a hard time recruiting because they're really bad at it now. The guy, no, seriously, they actually changed up how they do it, and he changed it up for the worse. Sometimes, in fact, often, you know, we hear about these fantastic, you know, huge cults and these psychotic cult leaders and how do they get away with it for so long and all that. That's actually rare. So many more of these guys crash and burn so quickly. And Miscavige, the guy who runs Scientology right now, well, he's been at it for longer than L. Ron Hubbard ran it now at this point. And he's running it right over a cliff. Like, it's wonderful to watch, just so you know. You know, it would be like, I mean, you know, it's, I don't know, what would it be like? I don't know how to describe it. It's just,
listen, if I like, for me, if I had got to watch the Catholic Pope like fall out of power and every single church closed down, I would be like, oh yes, baby.
It would be like, it would be like watching the Pope order them to lock all the doors of all the churches, you know, that are in cities that start with the letter C or something. I mean, some arbitrary nonsense, right? Like that kind of stupid decision making is what Miscavige does. So it's kind of a little bit of a delight at this point watching him, you know, crash this thing. And of course, as an ex-cult member, you know, ex-Scientologist, I am far from objective on this topic. So I don't pretend to, you know, to be neutral.
Listen, I was never a Scientologist and I'm all for it to watch it burn to the ground. You know, I love a hot massive a dumpster fire. I love it.
And yes,
It'd be
the
like if
top
Sign
you
Froda.
saw,
lotus do believe it. Yeah, they all believe it.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's yeah, it's kind of interesting the perspective that you put on it with the way framing is so important for
Mm.
if you're managing the information that people are receiving and the language that they're using and the way that they're talking about something, you're basically creating an entire bubble that they're living in that reinforces the belief that they're in the right place. You're creating that image for them that would be very difficult for someone to think their way out of because the tools aren't there for them to do that with.
That's right. The other thing that a lot of people miss when they are observing cults from the outside is they ask themselves, you know, and it's perfectly understandable, right? You're trying to have empathy for this person. You go, well, if I was in that position, I wouldn't. And the truth, of course, is if you were in that position, you would, because you're in that position. That's what that position does. But they project themselves into that situation, right? Instead of realizing the road that put that person there. And they, and you know, and again, they routinely mess this up. It's you don't know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. You just think you do, you know.
Yeah.
So if you were going to give us your thesis on how, you know, smart people are in cults, what would your thesis statement be?
Well, I mean, it would be that smart people have a fully developed emotional needs and emotional life as anybody else does. And so, therefore, those emotions can be manipulated and preyed upon. And that's why.
It's about
Awesome.
psychology. It's not that
Yeah.
someone was particularly silly to get into it. The techniques were there that could be used on anyone.
That's right. You can arm yourself against Scientology by watching Scientology in the Aftermath, Going Clear, reading my book, watching some podcasts. You'll never fall for Scientology. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's what we want. But don't think that tomorrow you can't fall for the Moonies. Right? If you haven't armed yourself, if you don't know what to look for in yourself, you're going to run into one of these things. And even people who come out of a cult will cult hop to another one because of these unmet needs. Or an unacknowledgement, a lack of recognition that they even have these needs. You know, one of the reasons I talk about this is because I'm just trying to let people know they have them. I can't believe how many people respond to my talks about this by going, I didn't even know I had emotional needs. Like, we're really dumb about this stuff. So I really got to talk about this a lot to get across to people that we are all incredibly vulnerable people.
I want a future where everybody has their therapist on speed dial. That's the future I want.
and you got Demon Haunted World on your phone. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, your baloney detection toolkit.
Yeah,
that's right. Like, you keep that was one of the first things I encountered getting out of Scientology, and frankly, I credit that random encounter with Carl Sagan to semi random. I was Googling how do I stay out of cults, and Carl Sagan's bullshit detection kit came up, and I was like, this is what I've been looking for. And that was just within a few months of getting out. So I really lucked out in hitting on critical thinking and skepticism early on, and I embraced it. And unfortunately, what I found is that a lot of people don't, right? Their emotions are still carrying them through their life. And so they're still looking for that emotional fulfillment. And this is the reasoning behind almost every bad decision all your friends and family make is, you know, they're just operating on their emotions.
And like if he's onto magical thinking, you know, that the two feed each other.
Yeah.
You know, and that also causes, because your magical thinking is basically based on emotion. You know, things that make us feel good, things that makes us feel comforted. This is something that I know, you know, and unless you're able to take a step back and say like, oh, this, you know, these are emotional things I'm responding to, not, you know, logical, which takes more work. And if you're, and like I was saying, we're emotional, irrational meat bags. And it takes work to take a step back and actually use your logic brain. And that's something that takes practice. And even those of us that are perfectly aware of this still struggle every day with this. And yeah, we all do, because we're fallible human beings. And so I really appreciate acknowledging that, because I think that people think that it's very easy to be like, well, this seems like bullshit, I wouldn't fall for it. It's like, well, no, you just need the right person at the right time saying the right thing.
That's right. They say I can talk to you about Xenu and galactic overlords and space opera and all that bullshit. And I can, and you'd be like, yeah, Scientology, it's a bunch of shit, right? Or I could talk to you about a whole other set of stuff in Scientology that sounds amazing and has nothing to do with any of that. And it would sound very useful for your life and very useful for organizing your relationships and yourself and your family. And you'd be like, oh, that sounds useful. That sounds like something good. And I'd be like, yeah, that's Scientology. And you'd be like, wait a minute, what? You know?
So you mean they're not,
right? But it's
they're
all
not presenting it as a caricature of itself. They're presenting the parts that are enticing.
That's right. And there's a lot of them. So it's easy to talk about the crazy and go, oh, they're all a bunch of crazy idiots. But if I explain to you how people actually get in and the kind of principles that they're following, it ain't got nothing to do with Xenu. Xenu's not day one. He's not day two. He's not year two. You're in for a while before you get to Xenu. So the stuff that people get in on is stuff that would make sense to you. It's not that crazy weird stuff. And that's one of the faults of the way we talk about cults and the way we talk about cults like Scientology is they go to the extreme crazy and they really don't explain there's a lot more that doesn't sound crazy at all. It is crazy, but it doesn't sound crazy.
Well,
They
that's
sneak
their way
that in after they've got you hooked.
Yeah, and then the sunk cost fallacy kicks in. Like, well, I've been in it for this long, you know, and I invested all this time and money into it, you know, like, oh, there must be some kind of truth in it and can because we're very good at rationalizing ourselves into bullshit.
Yes, we are. Yes, yes, we are. And that statement right there would probably be my better statement, my better thesis statement than that long thing I gave you. We're really good at rationalizing ourselves into bullshit.
Well, on that note,
thank you. I'm glad I was glad I gave you a new thesis statement.
That's what Helen's here for.
That's what
thesis
I do.
Statements and coolness and bad rap.
I am. I'm here for that's the major thing.
Yes, she wears many hats.
I do.
Yes, and we love that. And as we start to wrap up, we do have some questions. Before we move to Q&A, do you have anything else you want to mention or leave us with?
Or shill.
Oh, shill. Yeah, sure. My book.
Yes, tell us where we can find you and your book.
Okay, cool. So this is on Amazon and it's audio, ebook, and published form. And I have a podcast every week, Sensibly Speaking podcast. I do a Q&A show every week on Sundays. And I do a live show every Friday called Critical Conversations. And so check out my channel. I'm on YouTube. And also, if you are somebody who seriously needs help or assistance in how to deal with somebody who's in a coercive situation, whether it's a cult or a gang or a domestic situation or something, I can help. I can consult on that. So you can contact me and we can arrange that.
Excellent. We did have some people asking about that earlier, so they should go to your website, mncriticalthinking.com.
That's right. There's a contact form. You can contact me through that website, or you can email me at askchrisshelton@gmail.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. This was wonderful. Many people in the chat are thanking you for giving this excellent presentation. And we do have a lot of questions. So let's go straight into it. Okay, we'll get to
you start the questions. I have to do a quick bio break. I'll be right back.
No worries. All right. And so here's a question that I just saw that I'm interested in too. Someone asked, have you ever heard of the Landmark Forum? And if so, does it have any connection to Scientology or cult information that you know of?
It does. And yes, Werner Erhard started a group called EST, Erhard Seminar Training, in the 1970s. People may have heard of this. This developed over time into Landmark, and then Landmark Forum, and then Forum. And so that's what we have now, is this sort of, 20 years later, 30 years later version of EST. And EST was taken, a lot of EST was taken from Scientology, not all of it, but a lot of it. So yeah, pretty direct connections between those things in terms of an evolutionary line. And we refer to Landmark Forum as a large group awareness training activity rather than a cult as such. They use cultic recruitment and retainment techniques, right? Retention techniques. But they're large group awareness trainings, and those are basically as culty as Scientology. They engage in manipulative, emotional nonsense to get you to keep paying money.
Wow. Yeah, I know some people that got into that as well and had no idea that you could get into a cult that wasn't a religion. Like, they were taken by surprise because they thought cults were religions, and this wasn't that. And
Yeah.
just,
Well, I try to tell people, it's got nothing to do with the beliefs.
mm-hmm.
That's not what makes a group a cult. It's what they do, right? Are they abusive? Are they manipulative? Are they deceiving? Is there informed consent? And it looks like the answer to all of those questions at the beginning is no, not at all. Of course not. But they are.
Yeah. It's a trap.
Yeah, it's a trap. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. So someone else is asking, and I am assuming this is asking about a particular department within Scientology. They're wondering, did the Office of Special Affairs ever come after you?
Yes. I have a hate website posted right now about me by OSA. It's part of Leah Remini's Aftermath site. They've got a whole site that basically, it lays waste to anybody who was on her show, and I was on there twice, so I got some nice.
Have you arrived now?
Oh yeah. No, the day after my first appearance on Scientology in the Aftermath in season 1 is when that website went up. The day after, and it's got my ex-wife trashing me and stuff like that on video. It's wonderful.
I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness.
Awesome stuff.
It's like ugh. Just because you're like, I don't really dig this anymore. It's just gross.
Yeah.
And this is a known tactic with many cults, Scientology included. You mentioned this earlier. It sounded like this kind of tactic was one of the things that actually drove you out of the group altogether.
Correct. Yeah, because once you start getting targeted, it's like awful hard to want to stay in the group. And but more importantly, I had internet access after I left the Sea Org. So I guess I didn't finish that part of the story, but yeah, I went down the internet rabbit hole, and for 3 months my eyes were like, what the fuck? There was a lot of stuff that had been hidden from me, right? A lot.
Did you get attacked by the squirrels, or have you been
squirrels? No.
Okay.
No. Squirrels are people who practice Scientology outside of the church or Scientology and run off with it, right?
Right.
And like EST, for example, Scientologists think of EST as a squirrel group, a bunch of squirrels.
Oh, okay. All right. See, this is why I need terminology explanations to me, because this Scientology is weird. Like all religions, it's weird.
Language is hard.
Yeah.
Well, what else do we have, Helen? Any more questions?
Okay, so
go ahead. You respond. Yeah, this question here. If people in Scientology don't have internet access, what is the point of an internet page criticizing you? Who is it supposed to be for? Okay, let me clarify what I said about internet access. Public level Scientologists who live and work in the real world obviously have internet access. What they tried to do in the early 2000s was put a filtering program on the computers of every Scientologist in the world so that they would not be able to look up Xenu and anti-Scientology stuff. And they succeeded a little bit, but they did it deceptively, and it kind of blew up a little bit and it didn't really work. But they don't have to really do that because there are all these mental thought policing tricks that they teach you in Scientology that they sort of enforce on you in order to keep you so that you'll police yourself from going on the internet. And we talked earlier about that word interpolation, for example. It is a crime in Scientology to be connected to a critic of Scientology. It's a crime. You'll get kicked out for being connected to somebody like me. And if you're watching videos, you're connected to me, right? So and everybody in Scientology learns this very early on, right? There's this whole body of stuff you got to learn that has its own language connected with it. Again, we don't need to get into it tonight, but they have words for this, right? And if you're connected to a suppressive person, then you are what's called a potential trouble source, and you're going to be in trouble, and you're going to, be on the edge.
I love that.
I like that too. That's way better than a stumbling block, a potential trouble source.
I love that. I'm going to put that as my tag on it. Potential trouble.
Potential trouble source.
I can put that as my subtitle. Helen Green, potential trouble source.
Potential trouble source.
Oh yeah, no, that's the word, and it's or PTS. You are PTS. And this becomes a thought-stopping cliche, but it is a thing. It's a thing in Scientology. It's not a real thing, but in Scientology, they make it a thing. And this is how they police you, is you can't be PTS, so don't be connected to any suppressive people. And the logic that they explain, and let's remember, these are Scientologists who really do believe in Scientology. So when you tell them, look, all the Scientology that you're ever going to need, all the answers you're ever going to want about Scientology are right here in the Church of Scientology. Why would you go to some website from some rando on the internet who had a bad experience with Scientology and is telling you all this dirt about it? So what? This is Scientology. It's right here. It's all the books. It's all the lectures. This is all you need, right? And Scientologists like that logic. They're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So this is all you need, right? And so, it's kind of like, this is your Bible. And this is the Bible, this is all you need, man. It's all in here. You don't have to go read Satan, it's all in here, right? So they're just lying to you out there. They're just telling you a bunch of crap. Why would you go do that? And then, of course, on top of that logic is you're going to get in trouble if you go look at it. So it's a 1-2 punch. And through that, they manage to control people for a good long time. The internet is the constant thorn in their side, though. And the problem is that, curiosity killed the cat, right? So people keep doing that. And we didn't get into it tonight at all, but there are other mechanisms of control that exist in Scientology to tamp that down and discourage people from getting on the internet. So that's the answer to the question. And they do want Scientologists to look at the hate sites. They direct them to the hate sites. Right?
The sites of hating on former Scientologists.
And entice anger in them. Like, you should be mad at this because they're lying to you and they're saying horrible things, and talk the emotional part, not the rational part of the brain.
Well, see, here's a bunch of people who want to believe in L. Ron Hubbard. Give me a good reason, that I shouldn't believe this critic. Well, here's his ex-wife trashing him, and she's in the Sea Org, so she's ethical. He left. He's not. So automatically, right? And now here's a bunch of dirt on this guy. He was a deadbeat dad. He's a sex freak. He's a this, he's a that, right? They just make all this crap up. And that gives Scientologists enough reason to not believe.
To discredit, yeah.
Right? The term they use for it, Hubbard pulled out of the book Art of War by Sun Tzu. He calls this the dead agent tactic. right?
Oh.
Where you basically kill the agent, right? You make it so he's a liar, so nothing he says is you can trust, and therefore he's dead to you, right? And that's the dead agent thing, and that's why there's all the hate websites and everything on us critics.
If you assassinate the messenger, we don't have to address the message at all.
Correct.
Yes.
Like, you weren't here for
they never address the message, by the way.
You weren't here when we were discussing, but the Catholic Church is the same thing about, like, you police yourself, like, because there's nobody active within the Catholic Church that's actually paying attention to anything that you're doing. But you'll go to confession at the end of the week and confess your own wrongdoings to the priest to get absolution of it. So they don't really have to monitor you because you're monitoring yourself, and because you know that God's watching you all the time. So it's the same psychological manipulation that happens within the Catholic Church. That it seems to happen in all religions, that you can, why do I have to police you when I can just make you feel guilty for everything that you're doing that we don't think is okay?
You got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we have time for one more question. Helen, do you want to pick our last question of the evening before we wrap up and go to Hangout?
Yeah, absolutely. So have you heard of any cults developing out of psychological treatment modalities or psychological paradigms?
Yep, absolutely. Everything from primal scream to radical honesty. Oh yeah, if you've ever heard of that radical honesty crap, that's a total cult. Yeah, so
it's not healthy.
No, it's really bad. And the guy who literally wrote the book Radical Honesty, Brad Blanston or something. Anyway, this guy's been up in my grill for the last 3 days. I've been researching that group, but no, cults come in all shapes and sizes. And when it comes to pseudotherapeutic cults, Scientology, of course, top of the list. They've got a whole pseudotherapy, right? Pseudoscientific nonsense. And they even bring in this electronic device, this e-meter, right? Which is another level of bullshit. But we can go to lots of other groups, right, who have used where therapists, licensed therapists, have gone completely off the deep end and have engaged in sexual misconduct and physical violations and beating up on their patients and stuff like that. This has happened over the years, and there have been many groups that this has happened in. I think about Primal Scream and Synanon right away. Those are kind of famous ones, even though they're older ones. But a current one that's operating right now is Radical Honesty.
Interesting. And so if someone looked up this Radical Honesty and they were going to buy the book or whatever, what are some clues they would notice right away that you would recommend, hey, pay attention to that. This is how to steer away from this?
The thing I would look for, and the thing that alarmed me the first about that group, was the boundary violations. We have personal boundaries for a reason, and every single cult, every one of them, is going to want to violate your boundaries, physically and psychologically. And so when you have a group of people who are, exhilarated by this sudden, surge of adrenaline that they can violate their social etiquette and customs by being radically honest with somebody and telling him what they really think, that sounds great up until the point you realize that part of the philosophy is if the other person has a problem with the stuff you're doing, that's on them. That's not your fault, right? They're responsible for their condition and you're fully responsible for yours. So how you interpret the world is totally up to you. So if they have a problem with something you're doing, fuck them. And that's not a very socially acceptable attitude in the long run, right? Maybe one or two people you say fuck them, but the whole world, right? That's not how this works. And that's not how societies are built. And there are many, many, many other sort of predatory problems with radical honesty when it comes to how men in that group operate towards women. Suddenly I'm
shocked.
Unbridled truth about how I'm so attracted to you and how, what we really should be doing right now and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it gets bad quick. So So yeah, but it's all built around this idea of a therapeutic practice written, in this book by a licensed therapist. He's no longer licensed, by the way, because he kept wanting to have sex with his patients. So they were kind of
Why
like,
is that
why is
not
that
at
always
all
a
surprising?
thing?
Every time it's this.
That's right.
I'm not going to go into it now, but like just go to the Radical Honesty website and go through the 6 tenets that they state of what you're looking for. And if anything's raising a red flag, you should pay attention to that, because
pay attention to red flags.
Yeah, like if you're like, that's weird, that's the type of stuff you should be looking for. Like,
that's right.
Because if you look at it, it sounds really good. Like, but the thing is though, is that it's a manipulation of language. Again, we're going back to the beginning of how these groups use that to control members and to entice them and be like, I'm going to join this thing. It's really good. Blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. Well, the thing that really threw me was when I saw on one of those pages on their website a reference to someone's horrible or what was it that they said? It was your horrendous reactive mind.
Horrendous.
Now, reactive mind is a term out of Dianetics and Scientology, which Brad ripped off from L. Ron Hubbard, which was the biggest red flag to me, that this was not legit therapy anymore. We were off into cult land. When you're cribbing on L. Ron Hubbard for your work, right? Like, so yeah, that's
flag.
What's going on there.
Hey, Chris, have you heard of Till Swan?
Yes, I have.
She's another one.
I talked to one of her survivors.
Oh, did you? I'm going to watch that.
Yeah.
Is that on your YouTube channel?
It is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to watch that. I haven't seen that yet on your channel. I'm going to watch that because,
Excellent.
oh boy.
I'm going to put the link in for that again.
Yeah. Internet cults are a thing now, and internet gurus are a thing.
Yeah.
It's a whole new model, because you can have a whole cult situation without having any physical contact, which is really weird. And eventually it will get to physical contact when it really goes culty. But these things are starting online now. And we saw this with QAnon, most specifically, recently. But also, what was this guy, Stefan Molyneux, years ago? This was one of the first internet gurus. And Teal Swan was one of the other ones.
Yes. So this is a thing that's still going on. This isn't just
stuff
that came out decades or centuries ago to watch out for. This is new things that can be repackaged and redelivered to you in unexpected places. So we have to be constantly evaluating for this, right?
Well, and also too, if you put in like into certain search engines, if you want to, like, I want to be more honest, education's on honesty, you can get radical honesty, and you start looking at that stuff and actually, and they're using psychological language, emotional language, and that it seems like a really good idea. Like, this is why a lot of cults, they might do some outside work, but they just need people to go on the internet, put in certain search terms, and they'll come up and people are drawn to that. And if you don't have your critical thinking hat on, coming from your emotional state, you'll get manipulated into that. So like, cults don't have to use, go to college campuses anymore, or hang around coffee shops. All they have to do is get vulnerable people that will get influenced.
That's right. They still do.
Yeah.
But you're right. They don't have to anymore. And there's a world of cultic crap all over the internet. It's pretty bad. And I say to people that the right way to think about critical thinking or your own skepticism is you got to think of it like a martial art. It's a discipline. It's a skill you're learning, and you are never going to be done learning it. Just like you're never done with your black belts, right? Like, you're constantly honing this. This is the thing about it, because we're not organically very good critical thinkers. We really suck at it. And you got to train yourself into it. And it's a discipline. You got to practice it. And that's why the little pieces of advice, right? Like, take your time, stop, give yourself, time to think, stuff like that. I try to keep it simple because people's emotions will just carry them away in the moment,
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really good point, and it's something that we need to be watching out for, and it's not your fault that it's happening, because these organizations have fine-tuned these techniques to manipulate you and prey on what they know is normal human psychology. So you're having to outsmart them using techniques that are designed to work well. So
That's right.
yeah, this is an effort, and we are close to the end of our time. This has been amazing, really good information. I've
Good.
learned a lot. Do you want to leave us with any other final thoughts before we wrap up?
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you very much for inviting me and being so wonderful to me.
We're going to have you back in 2024, Chris. Like, it's going to be a thing. I'm going to twist your arm.
I'm more than happy. This is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to y'all. I'm really glad you had me, and I look forward to doing it again.
Excellent. Well,
right.
Thank you so much. And don't forget to check out Chris's links. And we'll go ahead and wrap up now. I know Chris has some social obligations to get to, so let us do a couple of closing thoughts real quick, and we'll get you out of here before the hangout. So don't forget to join us next week, same time, same channel. We're going to have Travis McKee-Vorst talking about identifying your values. This is the workshop that he did at our fall excursion earlier this year, or a similar variation of that for the online format, which was awesome. So don't forget to check that out next week. We'll be here live. And then our previous shows can be found on our YouTube channel at Recovering from Religion, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, you can email us with any ideas for future shows, comments, questions, things like that at rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. And don't forget to check out our blog and our podcast. Now, Helen, where can people find us on the interwebs?
Okay, people, like, you are all internet savvy people, so you need to go to the Facebook main page. That is Recovering from Religion, where we post all of our stuff of what's going on within RfR as a whole. And then we have a support group page where you can not only get support, but find out where our support groups are. So go to facebook.com/RfR support groups project. Also, we are on the artist formerly known as Twitter, which is X, until Elon decides that he hates the fucking platform and burns it to the ground. But go there, because we're on the X. I hate saying X because people still using the old terminology. It's very confusing.
I don't like it. Don't go there.
I don't
go
like it either.
Else.
Yeah, but if you are on the X, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, please just share, do the tweeting, Xing. I don't know what it's called anymore. It's very confusing. You know how to do it. You know the social medias. You're smart people. Also, as well, we are on Instagram and on TikTok. So once in a while, you will see a volunteer pop up on TikTok and talk about how awesome Recovering from Religion is, which I need to do at some point, which I should, but that's a different story. Anyway, I'm going to do the feedback poll. So I need all of you wonderful people that are in our audience to do the feedback poll. I cannot see it if Cars launched it.
I have launched it. It should
all right,
be
then you have to
for
read the
others.
questions. And I can't do my funny bit because I can't see it. So you have to read them.
Oh, this happened to me last week. Okay, I will read it, but it won't be as good. So these are the statements. Imagine Helen describing them, though, with my voice. So number 1, the program was relevant to me. Answer choices are on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not at all relevant and 5 being very much relevant. Will come back again. That's actually a different question. Statement 2, the speaker was clear and understandable. Same answer range, 1 through 5, with 1 being not at all understandable. Helen, what do we call number 1, not at all understandable?
You have a banana phone, or you're talking through tin cans.
Banana phone. All the way through 5, which is very understandable. It's like we were
right
in the
next
same
to you.
room.
Very clear.
Very clear. Very clear. all the way to clear. That's like level
all the way.
27.
Like it's a
I'm
sign
given to understand.
you've cleared all the Thetans.
You've reached clear. You've reached clarity. Yes. Number 3, I will definitely attend future programs like this with same answer scale 1 through 5. 1 being definitely will not attend again. This was terrible. I hated it. All the way through 5. Will definitely attend again. This was great. Hopefully it's that one.
That's how you get cooler. You come back.
That's true. You do get cooler. Yeah. And then finally, how did you find RfRx tonight? Was it through the online community or the Slack channel? Was it through a meetup event? Was it through Facebook, X, or Instagram? Was it through Discord, through the RfR website, or something else? And I will leave that up while we bring on the amazing Dr. Darrel Ray to close us out for the evening. Darrel, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. And thank you, Chris. I know you got to get going. I just wanted to say a few words before you checked out here tonight. But first of all, Chris and I had a great conversation a week or two ago for his podcast, and he really hasn't pumped his podcast or shilled for it tonight. So I wanted to pump it a little bit. He has a great podcast. I've been watching it off and on for years. I don't know how long you been doing that podcast, Chris?
8 years.
8 years. Wow, you are like the granddaddy of podcasters at 8 years.
I've been doing it for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, in our conversation, he and I's conversation, he said it'll be released in a couple of weeks. But it's not just listening to what he and I talked about. He's got good content, and content like we just heard tonight every week on his show. So tune in, listen to what he's got to say. And I want to emphasize that this culty thing and the therapy piece, thanks for bringing it up, Chris. That is such a big problem. There's so much bullshit among therapists. And as you know, that's why we started the Secular Therapy Project, because if a therapist made it into our database, they're very unlikely to be culty. I can't guarantee it. You know, people do change. And if they were admitted 5 years ago, they may have found Jesus or something, but they usually are pretty damn safe with our people. And that's why we created the whole thing. I like the one piece you early on talked about, Chris, because I don't think people think about this, and that is how our language traps us, even imprisons us, and how religion uses language to control us. And I'm familiar with the research you talked about earlier in about Chinese concentration camp prisoners. There's another one called Battle for the Mind by William Sargent. Similar kind of research that he did back in the 1950s. So if you're interested, that's a couple different resources for that. So I would challenge you, if you're listening to me right now, to go back and think about what kind of language do you still have in your brain that traps you in a way that makes you feel guilty or shameful or embarrassed about something that's perfectly normal. And that's especially true around sexuality, because almost all cults, even non-religious cults, tend to have some component of sexuality that they try to use to control you. And also, if you've not watched Leah Remini's series on Scientology, it's very worth watching. But I want to add something that, Chris, you probably know this, Chris, but Leah Remini did a second series on the Jehovah's Witnesses.
One episode, yes, of the Scientology in the Aftermath. Yeah, that's right.
She did one episode of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yep.
And if you watch it, if you look at the panel of people that are in the documentary, the lower right-hand person is Shanna Rubio, who is on our board of directors. So she's been made famous by Leah Remini's stuff, and in part that's how we found her. I don't remember exactly how she came to us, but Shanna's been with us for 5 years or so, and is a great board member, and she's a volunteer coordinator. So if you're a volunteer, you don't know it maybe, but you came through her to get here today. I want to throw one more book out. I didn't hear you mention it. I don't know if you're aware of it, Chris, but it's Robert Cialdini's book called Influence. That's just the name, Influence.
I was this close to bringing it in, and when I mentioned Influence, but I forgot to mention the author. Yeah, Cialdini's Influence is
it's
no other place you're going to get that data.
Never. It is the It's the hallmark of all books. It's the best you can read, and he's updated it. It's like, I think I read it 30 years ago, and it really influenced me because it helped me understand how I was being influenced by people, car salesmen or ministers. But he's updated it a couple times, and because there's a lot of new psychological research out there on the very stuff that Chris has been talking about tonight, and you can find it in that book. So, I would highly recommend looking at that. And last but not least tonight, I spent my weekend in front of a video camera getting videotape for the upcoming documentary on recovering from religion that Lindsay Doolittle is making. I was exhausted after 2 days of doing all that shit, and I had to drive over a damn bridge 30 times. While they were filming, it was quite an experience. I told Lindsay, "You've ruined documentaries for me forever. I now understand understand how the sausage is made." But the reason I bring that up is this is a big, big project. Lindsay has taken it on herself. If you've been watching some of our posts and stuff where we come from religion, this is going to cost her tens of thousands of dollars. She is committed to doing it. She's a very successful documentary maker already. So we and the board are very supportive of what she's doing. However, we have no financial relationship with this project. And that's an important thing the board has emphasized. We are not financially involved. We have no control over it, but we're super supportive of what she's doing. And the reason I bring this up is she needs help. In order to make this documentary, it's going to take money. So if you've got a few extra bucks, go to the fundraiser, Lindsay's fundraiser, and her GoFundMe, and give her a few bucks. Help her see that there's lots of people out there that want to see this content. And I'll just say that there's a bunch of people I'm looking at right now on the screen that got interviewed. Jason, you got interviewed, didn't you?
No, technically not yet. No.
Oh, okay. And
Helen,
you got interviewed.
Tara got interviewed.
Glenda got interviewed, didn't you? Oh, you didn't get interviewed. Okay. Well, I know that Kara got interviewed.
Questions.
Yes.
Kara got interviewed. There are people that we're looking at right now that got interviewed at the excursion. We're like Gail and I got interviewed at the American Atheist Convention, and she's going to a lot of trouble to really find people within recovery from religion to talk to. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chris, so much.